Meeting to order. This meeting of the Board of Chiropractic Examiners Continuing Education Committee is being held by teleconference pursuant to the statutory provisions of Government Code Section 11133. The date is Tuesday, October 25th, 2022, and the time is 12:09. The board's paramount responsibility is to protect the health, welfare, and safety of the public through licensure, education, and enforcement in chiropractic care. Members of the public may address the committee during the public comment session. Public comments will also be taken on agenda items at the time the item is heard and prior to the committee taking any action on said items. Those who would like to provide public comment will be limited to 3 minutes unless in the discretion of the committee circumstances require a longer period. Members of the public will not be permitted to yield their allotted time to other members of the public to make comments. Individuals may appear before the committee to discuss items not on today's agenda. However, the committee may not discuss or take action on these items except to decide whether to place the matter on the agenda of a future meeting. Please be aware that this meeting is being recorded. Please turn off or silence all cell phones, and we will now take the roll call. Dr. Adams, would you please take the roll?
Yes, thank you. Dr. Paris?
Present.
Dr. Adams, present. Dr. Daniels?
And she has been excused and will be absent
Yes.
today.
So we do have a quorum.
Thank you. Okay. Moving to agenda item number 2, review, discussion, and possible recommendation regarding proposed changes to the board's continuing education course review and approval process, including a potential renewal process for previously approved courses. And I would turn this over to Ms. Kristen Walker to give the staff report on this agenda item.
Sure, thank you. So let me see here. So under the board's current course approval process, board-approved providers must complete and submit a CE course application form and submit an hourly breakdown of the course, a final copy of the syllabus or course schedule, a copy of the course brochure and any promotional material, and the CV for each instructor. After reviewing this application package, staff notifies the provider of the approval or denial of the course, and approved courses can be offered unlimited times for up to 1 year. The board does not currently have a renewal process for CE courses, so providers must submit a new application package if they wish to continue providing the same course after this initial approval period has expired. Over the past few years, this committee has been discussing updates to the course approval process, which include updating the application form, recognizing PACE accredited providers and allowing them to apply for approval of CE courses, requiring the submission of a course description, including the competency, course objectives, and participant outcomes based on board-approved competencies, requiring that the instructor's CV demonstrate how they are appropriately credentialed based on the content of the course, and then also requiring that providers submit the name and contact information of their certifying attendance official, an attestation form for each instructor, examples of course examinations to be administered during or at the conclusion of a course, an example of their certificate of completion, and the post-course evaluation form. The committee has also discussed prohibiting courses that contain business techniques or principles that teach concepts to increase patient visits or patient billings per visit, or courses that include topics outside the scope of chiropractic. Additionally, any physical activities conducted during a course must support the curricular activities of that objectives of that course. And providers must notify the board of any substantive changes to the course, and the board will have 14 days to process and approve or deny those changes. And providers may not make changes to the course without the board's written approval. So as far as with today's meeting this afternoon, the committee is asked to continue its discussion regarding the course approval process and consider whether any additional changes may be necessary, such as further defining the standards for the approval or denial of a course and its content, and also a potential renewal process for previously approved courses. But before I return this item to the committee, I would just like to outline 2 comments that have been received for this agenda item. The first from committee member Dr. Pamela Daniels, who was unable to join us this afternoon, commented that she does not believe courses need to be reviewed every year, but she believes 3 years should be the maximum approval period before the course material must be updated based on the current understanding of the topic, which can then lead to a deeper comprehension of the subject and material. She also commented that it should be the provider's responsibility to clearly provide a breakdown of each subject, of each section of the course, and reference it to the appropriate subject area, so staff is not spending time and resources doing that for the provider. And she also noted that the board's fees were not even keeping up with the CPEI, which makes program solvency unattainable even with efficiencies in other areas. We also had a written comment from Dr. Marcus Strutz, a licensee and CE provider. Dr. Strutz resubmitted his letter dated October 5th, sharing his concerns with the increase to the CE course fees. He also offered 5 alternative solutions, including having an annual license fee for providers just like licensees, reducing the hourly rate, only reviewing new courses, charging less for previously approved courses, or have courses that have been previously approved get reapproved every other year or less often. Dr. Strutz also submitted a copy of a recent course approval letter from the board and stated his concerns with staff designating the category for elective courses. He also requested definite guidelines and language so providers can submit applications correctly the first time. With that, I would like to return this agenda item to the committee for discussion.
Thank you, Ms. Walker. So I will open this agenda item up for questions and discussion by the committee. Dr. Adams, do you have anything?
Yeah, I mean, I reviewed, our this is agenda item 6 from our last meeting. One of my concerns as I reviewed this is that one of the things that we want to get away from is creating more work for the staff, which has kind of been a problem, previously, right? That the staff was spending all this time because there was confusion about what was, approved or not approved. So I like what Dr. Daniels laid out. I think we should have, for courses that have been previously approved, that we need to obviously change the fee for those, because if there's not the fee increase that we just had go through was because the staff spending so much time on these courses, which if they've been previously reviewed and previously approved, the staff should just be able to take a quick glance at that and be done with it. Obviously, we needed to have a fee increase anyway because we haven't even kept up, but I think we should have a process for previously approved courses. I like the idea of, either every other year, approving those, or at least, say a submission that the course is the same. And, but, I think that the fees need to be commensurate with the work that's being attached to those. So I think we had talked about the possibility of having an approval process for new courses, which the $116 an hour fee or whatever we end up settling on would be applied to, and then for renewal courses. So I think having a separate process, I think either every other year, or having a reduced fee each year just for the processing side of it, kind of like the processing and handling type fee that you see so often on TV. That's commensurate with the time they spend. One of my other concerns also in reviewing this is we talk about the background. So for new courses, we have on here 4 items. An hourly breakdown of the CE course, which I think is already being done. Which I think, to Dr. Daniels' point, that the provider needs to, we need to do our part in making sure the competencies are very clear. And then the provider needs to make sure that when they do their hourly breakdown, that they state what, competency that, if it's a required or it's an elective type situation, they need to clearly define that so the staff is not having to hunt around and try to figure that on their behalf. So having the competencies clear on our part so the providers know what hour will cover what particular competency and what category that will fall into. Then it says a final copy of the syllabus and course schedule. And that seemed to be redundant to me. Number 2 and number 3 seem to be redundant. A final copy of the syllabus, course schedule, and then a copy of the course brochure and all the promotional material to be used. Now, that may be like for these big events that we're talking about, but I'm thinking for people that are submitting their course for approval that are perhaps having their course online, they may not have a quote hard copy syllabus that they're going to be. So I just don't want the staff to get hung up on, well, you don't have a final copy of your syllabus and course schedule, when the hourly breakdown is kind of the syllabus. It's the course schedule because they're hourly breaking it down. That seemed redundant to me. I'm assuming that the number 3, and maybe some clarification from you, Kristen, the number 3 item was a copy of the course brochure and other promotional material would be for some of these big events that we're talking about that people do, like are 30 hours and they're multiple tracks and they're going to have a brochure and they're advertising it. And I think that would be something separate. And then obviously the curriculum vitae makes sense. So maybe a little more clarification on those might be helpful, because I think that the staff might end up getting hung up on some of these things, which then could mean you're getting these submissions back and forth between provider and staff, which can drag the process out, cause more time when it doesn't really need to be. Because if the hourly breakdown is there, then it should be pretty clear what the course is going to be discussing and what competencies it will fall into. And then the final thing on the back, on some of the things that were outlined that I had, was when it says the instructor's CV must demonstrate they are appropriately credentialed based on the content of the course. I can see this being potentially problematic, because I think we need to remember that every chiropractor that's licensed in the state of California has passed National Board Part 4, which means they are then a board certified chiropractor. So it seems that any subject that's related to chiropractic in the areas of evaluation, management, record keeping, and those types of things, it would already be tacit in their board certification as a chiropractor when it comes to the required things that we're doing now. Obviously, if they want to talk about a specific technique, it'd be nice if the chiropractor were quote credentialed, say if they're a Gonstead or a upper cervical or Atlas orthogonal or something along those lines, would make sense for them to have a credential. They're going to be teaching that specific area. But for, I think, general chiropractic technique, cervical, thoracic, lumbar, extremities, which were being taught in school and they're getting tested on in the Part 4s, it seems like that could be a sticking point, I think, for staff to make, that. So maybe we need to separate that out and say for people that are going to talk about specific techniques or a specific area of expertise, such as pediatrics or chiropractic orthopedics or DAC-bar radiology, those things I think make sense for them to have a specific credential in that area. I happen to teach neurology. I am credentialed as a diplomate in neurology. So when I teach that, I'm teaching it with the neurological background that I have. So that makes sense. But at the same time, if it's an elective, it seems like, it's going to, I just don't want it to be a sticking point for staff for them to have to spend more time. So maybe us being clear about, specific courses that are touting a specific technique or a specific area of expertise within the chiropractic discipline where there is a diplomate status given, like neurology, radiology, pediatrics, orthopedics, and such forth, that we probably, should have somebody credentialed in those areas. And then I had a question about the examples of course examinations to be administered during or at the conclusion of the course, an example of the certificate of completion for the course, and the post-course evaluation form. Again, I think I don't know that we have determined that we're going to have, that's something that would be new in our CE, that we're going to be requiring them to have an exit exam for the CE course. I think it's a good idea, but I think we have to get clear about that, because again, I think that could be another sticking point in the approval process of new courses. And then I had a question, maybe open it up for discussion about if people are going to, if we're saying that the 10 hours that we're moving towards are going to be required or for a chiropractor every year, why would we not allow somebody I know in the past they haven't allowed for um, approval or receiving credit from a CE standpoint for like practice building things. Um, but I'm thinking if we're moving towards that elective side of things, and if people want to spend their time, I think we need to encourage people to do some of those things, and that might help in some ways with some of the infractions that we dealt with, or some of the challenges we're having in keeping chiropractors in California, because maybe they need some counseling and some help from some more experienced chiropractors. So I had a question about that, because we're saying that if there's business technique or helping people how to run their business, um, it seems like that should be an option. And I don't know if that's precluded in our chiropractic act or in our regulations, or if that's just something that a previous board kind of decided in negating CEs. So that's something I'd like to have more discussion, or maybe get some ideas as to why we don't, if it falls under the elective side of things. And those are my thoughts and comments after review. So I'll turn it back to you, Chair Paris.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Um, well, let me go through some of those points, and then we can kind of circle back. I had a few things also, and I'll be relatively brief. I think your point on the hourly breakdown and the final copy of the syllabus, I think that's something we can have staff look into and see if those actually measure up to be about the same. And that's probably one of those efficiencies that we're starting to find through this process. So thank you for that. It was a good catch. In regards to the course brochure and promotional material, I think we might just add language that notes, if there is any, and maybe if, like you mentioned, not every course gets promoted. Some are local, state association district meetings, things like that. And
Yes.
but I do think we want to see. I do think we want examples of those, and we do want them. I think it's in our interest to see those. And then the other thing would be to also, and maybe just for completeness, have it state that we would like to have any web-based promotional material links, et cetera. So oftentimes it's not paper. And regarding the renewal process, I think we'll circle back to that. I have some comments too. I think we're relatively in agreement there. In regard to the competencies, I think one discussion we might have, and right now, is just I would actually I want to make a suggestion that maybe we relook at the value of the competencies in general, and that either consider that maybe we don't need to lean on them as much as we initially thought we might, now that we've defined the 10 hours of mandated CE, under the 361. Yeah, I think that, and the competencies that we've proposed there, the evaluation and management, documentation, record keeping, coding, adjustment technique or manipulation, and then ethics, law, and jurisprudence, and the hours associated. I think those cover the idea that was initially kind of circling around with the CCE standards and having some competencies, kind of core competencies, and I think we've kind of defined them there fairly well. So I'm not so sure. I think there might be maybe not. Maybe I think there might be some broader categories we might consider, just so we know when submissions are coming in, kind of what they're under, whether they're clinical. I don't know, actually. So I think that might be a discussion we can have, that we may not need to lean on the competencies as much, but maybe more think about, like the learning objectives and the participant, the learning objectives of the course, et cetera, versus the, defining the competencies as specific categories. I think the important thing for us is the learning objective. Let me see. And regarding MBCE, just to be clear on the call, MBCE, and they state this on their website, et cetera. They don't actually certify anybody in anything, and they've stated such that really they only administer the tests, the examinations that we then use to allow people to get licensure in the state. So they they've actually stated, MBCE has stated that, like, using the term diplomate or certified, et cetera, by them, that's not really an authorized term. So just to be clear, and I think also that, yeah, I agree with you. The rest of that comment was in regards to how granular that would be as to qualification for a course, and I think we should have a little further discussion there too, in regards to a licensed DC engaged in a clinical topic is probably fine, unless we have reason to believe otherwise. Like, I don't think we want to get to a point where we're stating that you need advanced training to do continuing education. I mean, I think it's nice. I think it's attractive. I think if I'm looking for my own CE, I definitely look at the qualification of the presenter giving me the information, and I hope our licensees do the same. I just don't know that it's as granular as we need to be in approving the CE. So I think I agree with you there. And regarding the course evaluation comment in the kind of the exit exam, I don't think that's meant to be, and Ms. Walker, you could clarify that for me, that this is more meant to be a look at like a process improvement, not necessarily a pass-fail for, get CE or don't get CE. I think attendance is still the bar, and certifying attendance and having assurance of quality course, and assuring that the licensee attended the appropriate hours, et cetera. And so more of a process improvement, and maybe an opportunity for feedback from licensees to the course instructors, administrators, and to licensees to us. And I think it's somewhat of it may serve somewhat as an audit process, from the field. And yeah, I appreciate your comments about the CE for business or practice management. I think mainly that it should serve some public protection, some clinical need, some versus if it looks like the practice management is solely a business, serving the particular business model, then I don't know that we necessarily need to offer continuing education for it. I think there's a lot of, I think that gets kind of overlapped with practice management being kind of how to appropriately see patients in a timely manner and still do in the right way. And I think those issues might fall into categories that we've already would be willing to approve versus how to market your business towards a certain specialty, or I think there's a lot of overlap there. It gets a little tricky. Yeah.
If I might, just on that point, so would it be safe to say that perhaps portions of a seminar in those regards, because I've taken practice management courses over my life that have been both clinical and at times been business during the course of the 12 hours that I'm there over the 2 days. And I wonder if the provider that is giving that seminar were to delineate out in their course description, say, well, we're going to spend, during our 12 hours, we're going to spend, 2 hours on, documentation and whatever, and then some in management things, and they delineate that out, but then portions of it are going to be on business. would they have some portions of their course, even though it might fall under the full scope of their seminar, portions of it that would be approved then for that particular category in which they're addressing? Is that conceivable in this process, or would they just knock it as all under business and aspect?
I would say that that would be correct. I would say that's completely reasonable, and it shouldn't just be necessarily where we're looking at like the broader title, or in that it's more about the subject matter, the subject matter. And especially if we, as was mentioned earlier, if we have a good hourly breakdown of the CE course, and we know that for 1 hour, they're going to spend time on maybe documentation efficiencies, right? That are really kind of a big part of practice management. That's completely reasonable to submit for hours, and yeah, I think that's completely possible and reasonable.
Excellent. Can I follow up on just one other question that you brought up, just maybe for Kristen's clarification there
Of
on
course.
on the third bullet of the agenda from last time? I'm using the agenda from last time because I remember getting a copy of for today's, but it said one of the third bullet said providers must submit the name and contact details of their certifying attendance official. That could be them, right? Or the instructor could be the certifying person. Okay. And then it says examples of course examinations to be administered during or at the conclusion of the course. That seems nebulous to me. That's the one thing I just wanted some clarification on. Was what exactly was the intent of that language, and was the expectation that we were going to be having providers and the instructors of these giving tests or questions at the beginning or at the conclusion as like an exit test, or is it just purely attendance? So you gave the impression, David, that you were thinking along the lines that it's the attendance is still the benchmark, but an instructor may or may not give an exit exam, but they're not required to. Is that what I hear you say?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good practice to have some sort of self-check, learning check at the end of any continuing education. And mostly in the past, when I've done these, they've maybe checked in on some knowledge gain. And I've even done them pre and post, right? Like sometimes they'll ask you to take it before, and then they'll see if you've met the learning objectives. And usually those questions are framed around those learning objectives at the end. Did we meet our own objectives? So I think but it's also, I think, can be used not just as, and definitely wasn't. My suggestion was that it shouldn't be a pass fail, so that if you didn't meet the learning objectives, it's not like, oh, you're not going to get your CE. I mean, you attended, you attempted a learning opportunity, et cetera. But I think more to the point that it's an opportunity to provide feedback, and perhaps even a mechanism where we can get feedback as to like how the licensees are perceiving these courses, and was the subject matter germane to the syllabus, or the advertisements, et cetera, and were they there for 4 hours, and those types of things that are our concerns in the quality side, because we've already reviewed the course. Now we just need to know, is that actually being presented? I mean, from that perspective. So yeah, I didn't want it to be understood as like a pass fail, like you're going to go to 8 hours CE and then I only pass 4 or something. I don't think that's the intent.
Right.
Yeah. So I just had a few comments on some of the bullet points from the Agenda 6 item previously, which one of them was that licensees earn a maximum of 4 hours of CE credit per renewal period for attending a full board meeting. And I'd like us to maybe consider that should be hour for hour up to 8 hours. it doesn't seem to incentivize our licensees to engage in our process, which I think is a valuable learning opportunity. And I think we might limit that to 8 hours a year total, so you can't come to 2 board meetings. I mean, we still want, and also you'd still have your mandated CE potentially. So I think that would be a consideration that I'd like us to make, that we make that up to 8 hours of, hour for hour. Because we do that in the examination development testing, where we give them, hour for hour. And then the second thing was, if they're receiving up to 16 hours for examination development, and we end up moving forward with 10-hour mandated CE in those categories, we would have to be assured that some of the mandated CE categories fell underneath the examination development, or else we would be guaranteeing them 16, but really it might just end up being 14. Am I misunderstanding that, or is there a potential conflict? I think maybe we should make that up to 14 hours. That way we have assurances that they're still doing 10 mandated.
Oh, I
Is that
see.
confusing? Am I explaining that
No,
correctly?
no. Well, at first I was confused, but I follow what you're saying now. Yeah.
Yeah. So if we tell them they can get 16 hours, I know it says up to a maximum, but it kind of reads as if, like if I go for 2 days, I'm going to get 16 hours, and potentially then, I don't know. Go ahead, Kristen.
And I'm going to defer to either Dixie or Amanda on the line for the participation in those workshops. They may be receiving credit in ethics and law, not just general hours, but I'd ask Dixie to clarify that point for me.
Hi, this is Dixie. So right now in our we did, I believe, change our regulations to allow those to get credit for ethics and law, since it is for the our ethics and law exam for the state. It used to be, when we first adopted this continuing education regulations, it used to be general, but we did revise it more recently to be ethics and law.
Okay, so 16 would make more sense than if it encompassed 2 of the mandated hours. Okay, that answers my question. Thank you. That makes sense. Okay, and let's see. And then moving to the bullet points, just some minor suggestions in under the providers must submit a course description, including the competency, course objectives, and participant outcomes. I think we should add the term, those are the course learning objectives. And then maybe add also, the participant learning outcomes, just to be clear. And let's see where else here. We talked about the business related versus practice management. And then the physical activities conducted during a course must support the curricular objectives of the course. We should have some maybe suggestion to have some language in there that is, some sort of protection of, make sure that there's protection or vetting of any of like the live models that are used in that. Sometimes it's like a pull you from the crowd, or like a hand raise, and I think sometimes maybe it's even a little peer pressure filled in some of those. And so I think maybe even considering something that, just makes them aware of what's going to happen, and that there's some protection for them. And I think, Kristen, you had mentioned some other of the licensing boards have this language.
Correct. Yeah, I was looking at the PACE. They've got a 25-point list of requirements for approved courses, and they have a mention in there of when there's any live models used for demonstration, ensuring that there's informed consent and any post-demonstration care if necessary. So probably looking at something like that and potentially incorporating it, knowing that some courses do have live demonstrations.
Yeah, I think we always think of this as technique, necessarily manipulation, but you see this a lot also with like rehabilitation, and I think we'll see some of it with even some of the, if the competency one evaluation and management goes to 4 hours, I think we'll see probably some good, valuable workshops on that. So I think this language will bolster our ability to, have assurances that any of the just the safety and welfare of anybody participating in those. That's Yeah. So, okay. So I think the last thing we kind of circled back to was to discuss the renewal process.
Yes.
Do you want to give us your thoughts again on that, Dr. Adam?
I kind of like what Dr. Daniel said. I mean, I'm not tied to the years. I just think that if for the sake of staff, that we should have two tracks: those that are renewing an old a course that's already been approved before. If we want to set a limit to that and say 2 years or whatever the years are, I mean, I think whatever we decide on. But I think if the course has already been approved, it should be a different track, which is going to lighten the load on staff. And then there should be a commensurate. We should have probably a separate fee process for that as well, because it doesn't seem right to have a fee go from what it's been for a course that's already been approved to all of a sudden going to the hourly rate. And so if we have the power to do that, I don't know. That's something you can answer, Kristen, if we need to do something different. But it seems like to have a process for renewal of previously approved courses should be different. I mean, I think a reasonable fee, that's commensurate with the time they spend to do that would be appropriate. And I don't know what that is. It seems like it should be higher than 56, but doesn't necessarily have to be 700. So somewhere in there.
And just to add to that, so as far as looking at the renewal process, there's two factors that can be adjusted when we're looking at course approvals. There's one, the amount of time that a course is approved. So under the current regs, we approve them for 1 year. You could look at it biennial. So your first approval process, you get 2 years out of the gate, and then you could renew every year after that or every other year. We can kind of establish something like that. So that gives a little more flexibility on time. And then also, there's the fee. There's the fee increase that goes in effect at the beginning of the year, but the legislature did give us authority to reduce fees through regulation. So we can explore that further with legal counsel. We just wanted to bring it to the committee to get kind of your thoughts on the timeframes and then what that renewal process would potentially look like, so we can bring you back a proposal at the December meeting for discussion.
So do I hear? So what could be possible is we could say, okay, a person's going to have to pay the hourly fee, but if it's a renewal of a course that's previously approved, we could say now that course is now approved for 3 years or 4 years, like Dr. Daniel suggested. So in a sense, they'd be amortizing that increased fee over 3 years instead of each year.
I want to make sure I understood that. So there'd be are you talking about for the renewal period could be even longer than like 2 years? Is that what you mean, after the initial approval period?
Yeah, like I'm saying, the course that's already been approved that comes up, it's going to go to 116 an hour unless we create two different options, right? There's a renewal for previously approved and then a process for new courses being for approval, correct?
Correct.
So but can we have a separate fee for previously approved courses based on the current regulations?
We should be able to. We're just going to have to work closely on the language because within the statute, it just has a single fee for approval of a course. I imagine we can work with legal to get the wording just right that, it's approval of a previously approved course or something to that effect to eventually to make something similar to a renewal fee. Or we come up with some other kind of fee structure. We have to stay with what's in the current language of the bill. And we can work with legal to put something together that meets that need. And if for some reason it doesn't meet within the language of the statute, then we can go back to the legislature and try to get an amendment to that statute.
What's the timeline on that? Because you've got providers that are concerned about what's happening January 1.
So for regs, it generally does take about a year to get those done. We are going to be doing a big push here, actually just starting in November through the end of the year to really encourage providers to get their 2023 courses into us before December 31st, so that if you get it in by then, you avoid that fee increase for at least a year. And then ideally, we can work with the committee to get this implemented over the next coming year. We're about there when it comes to the approval process. We're kind of putting that structure together, and the committee's feedback today has been helpful, so we can start trying to really strengthen that up and solidify it, and then we can bring you back a proposal on a renewal process. And then once we kind of have the pieces together is when we can formally start a regulation process. But at this point, we're still trying to figure out the different pieces and what that vision is behind the renewal.
Okay. So what could we do today, that Dr. Paris and I could agree on that could give you direction? I mean, because I mean, Dr. Daniels and Dr. Paris and I seem to all be on the same page that something needs to be done to have two separate things. I mean, I'm comfortable with extending an approval, for 2 to 3 years, as Dr. Daniels, she said 3 years, but no more than 3 years without, just so that people are updating things. We're not having the same thing, without any updates. And then that was my question, is that if we did that and people submitted, that would not go into play, you're saying, for probably a year, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So I'm comfortable with that language, and then I think we can work out the details as to what a fee would be, what appropriate fee would be. And that sounds like what we have to do is get the ball rolling with legal and get the two tracks going, and then we discuss a fee and then see if we can't get that pushed through.
Correct. The two main items that we would need from the committee today is that initial. So Dr. Daniels' comment is a little bit different than a renewal. Hers is that it be approved basically for 3 years, and after that point, you have to reapply with fresh content, that you can't just resubmit the same thing. The other kind of track could be an initial approval process of a year, like what we currently have, and then an annual renewal after the fact, where the provider goes in and certifies that they have not changed the content of the course. They may have, an updated CV for the instructor, or, a new brochure or a new website that they need to show us, but nothing real substantial. And they just, at the time of renewal, they complete some sort of certification. They give us the new information, and then we can approve it at a lower fee. And they would do that annually, or we could do that biannually, or, at whatever time, the committee feels is appropriate. So there's the two different tracks you could have, and you could either set a limit or not on that renewal. So if you approve it for the first year under the comprehensive review, and then you allow renewal, is that allowed indefinitely, or, after a certain number of years, do they now, need to reapply?
Well, my only concern about that is that, certain things that relate to an exam or to a technique, to documentation, those things aren't really going to, the principles are the principles are the principle. I mean, that's not going to really change. So to say that somebody has to come up with a new way to talk about, evaluation and management and differential diagnosis, a lot of those things don't really change. Instructors change, but the principles, we may have new research or new information, but the basic outline is going to be very similar. I mean, I've taught for many years neurology. I mean, the tracks aren't changing. New information and new understanding and new applications come up, but the basic information is the same. So I think that could be a problem. Again, going back to the approval process, if someone's not refreshing, then they don't get approved, but their information is very good and very, very applicable. It's like Gonstead or certain upper cervical techniques haven't changed. The anatomy hasn't changed. The approach hasn't changed. Just new people are coming in and learning about that because there are new chiropractors every year. So that would be my only concern about if we just say, a course has to be refreshed or new or it won't be approved. I see that as a potential sticking point.
Okay.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Kristen.
Oh, no, go ahead, Dr. Paris.
Yeah, just so my impression, something we might consider is that I think 3 years is fairly reasonable to have a course get approval, and that they have the comfort and knowledge and ability to promote that course and market it, et cetera. I think there's some advantages for our CE providers to be able to do that, but I do think it would be valuable, because I think it would be maybe even a little irresponsible of us to not even have them make sure that we're doing a review, and that there's some staff work in just making sure that, yes, I'm still offering this course. Yes, let me verify it's still the same instructor. And I agree with you. I wouldn't expect them to necessarily change year to year, but I think even as part of maybe at the 3 year. Well, let me back up. So in that annual recertification, renewal process, that we know that that's mostly self-certification and attestation, right, for the responsible CE providers to let us know that the course remains relatively the same, and we're just continuing to offer this. I do think, and that could be something the staff could bring back to us, and you could tell me if we need a motion to direct that or not, but to bring back to us kind of an idea of what that cost would be, considering a renewal that way of a previously approved course. And I think at about the 3 year mark, I think our expectation to have them look and consider updates and actually have them again self-certify and attest that the areas of this course that could have been updated were updated. The areas that we did not identify any potential new knowledge, research data, or changes in billing coding, procedures, all of that stuff. And I think that lines up pretty well with patient safety too, because I'm looking back to when we used to do the CVA stroke screen, and we used to teach a test for that, and we no longer do that, just as one example. So I don't think that we can't say never, but I do think it's good just to make sure that the responsible CE providers are, staying current with that, and at least letting us know that, we've looked for an update. And I know the research data, like a lot of this stuff changes very slowly, so we may not expect, a whole different program, but we would expect that they've at least acknowledged that, there was some check and some research into that. Yeah. So that would be my preference. I guess, let me be clear, just to I think if we could see a 3 year renewal and know that that's approved, and I have 3 years and then now that we're, the self-certification attestation form just basically identifies all the things that let us know that, yeah, it's relatively the same course. And, I just need to let them know that I'm still offering it, because I do think we want to know, which courses are still currently being offered and which aren't. And it kind of feels like the Wild West if we just have all these approvals out there and we don't even know what's being offered at the time or not.
Agreed.
Yeah.
I think communication with the board that things are staying the same and are consistent, and that we've updated where we can update. I think that's a reasonable request. Yes. And
And
I'm comfortable with the 3 years. I think that's reasonable.
yeah, I do too. I yeah, I mean, I think we agree. I don't have much more to add to that. I think it's a good process. And I think too, with the efficiencies we're seeing in going to, as paperless as we can be, in a lot of aspects, I think that really streamlines this process. I mean, I think type your PDFs, all this type of stuff. I think it just makes this process so much faster, literally minutes from probably what was hours previously. So
Good.
So go ahead.
No, I just wondered if there was anything more that she needed from us on that topic.
Yeah, that was my question. And if we need a motion to direct staff to bring that back to us, a proposed renewal fee based on what we talked about.
If I could just get a little small point of clarification on that, when we're talking about 3 years, are you proposing that the initial approval period will be 3 years, and then every 3 years it must be renewed, and then with an annual certification after the first year of approval, or when is that certification occurring? Is that annually or every 3 years? That's the only. I'm trying to put the timeline together to make sure I have it right.
My suggestion was annually for the certification. I'll say attestation, self-certification. I think that describes it a little bit better because I envision that being fairly simple, brief, especially if the course hasn't changed. I mean, that should be, yeah.
So I hear you saying approve the course for 3 years, but a simple, short attestation each year. And then at 3 years, another type of self-attestation for what you're doing to update, where you can update and those types of things. Is that what I hear you saying?
Yeah, I believe so. And then any and significant any course changes really. We'd expect them to reapply.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's new courses. What about already approved courses? Are we thinking of them following a similar path once they're new? Like some of the boards already approved for say 4 or 5 years already every year. We have a different track for them, right?
I think we'd want to base it on the next approval, like if that's, whatever the next approval is, and, kind of go from there. Because I think one of the ideas that we had was that we would do a more thorough review. And, and the initial, the next reviews are going to be a lot more thorough. And so that was my thought. I don't know how we would do like a legacy approval. I mean, unless there's some thoughts on that.
Well, I'm just saying if it's a course that's already been approved before, I mean, wouldn't we just fall into the same category? It's a self-attestation that, hey, and then they pay their fee and move on, and we determine what that fee is for a course that's already been approved, and then perhaps have them follow the same track once that's done for every 3 years. Because you kind of got to have a grandfathering, right? Because people that have already been doing it, kind of a grandfathering of those that are already approved.
Yeah, I think it hinges on, but I think it hinges on the idea that we start the 3-year renewal period at some point. So existing courses that haven't been renewed yet would go through that, just basically what we've been doing, but the new renewal would be a 3-year renewal period. And then we could do the, attestation, self-certification from there. It seems and I know it seems a little more complicated to take. I don't know. Actually, I'm open to discussion.
What I'm getting at is that I'm thinking of the staff, right? If they've already approved a course 3 or 4 times or 10 times in the last 10 years or 3 years or 3 years or 4 years, there's not much work there's really virtually no work for them to do other than the provider attesting, like we're asking them, this is the same course, it hasn't changed. And then that's what I'm asking is that, if it's a course that's already been approved before, maybe we direct the staff to say, okay, this is a course that's been approved 10 times before, or 20 times, or 5 times. So, and then that provider's attesting to it's not changing, that then we approve them, and then they start to fall into that every 3-year thing. Is that kind of what you're saying? Because it seems like we need to look at that side of things, because the staff's already they've already been doing that every year. They've been reviewing them every year, even though they've been the same.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. We already have courses approved in the pipeline, right? And
in the pipeline or coming up that are the same.
Yeah.
And as it sits right now, they're going to be approved for a year, and then hopefully we get some of these things in place within that year. And that's what I'm looking at, is that when the year comes up and we get the regulations in place, are we going to have 2 processes? One for existing courses that have already been pre-approved, that have already been approved, and then a track for new courses? Or are we going to lump them all in the same and have every new course that comes up, you're going to get a 3-year approval, and then after that you got to attest each year, and then look to change if you have to? Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Yeah, I think there would be correct. I think what I'm hearing is correct. I think there would be 2 processes. One would be, into the future, new courses that would be approved. And then I think after the regulation goes through, any course approval would be for 3 years, and then you'd have the opportunity to recertify and renew it annually. And then, so yeah, I think considering the existing courses, I think is what we're
right
trying to figure out. Yeah. And you're speaking mainly to just the fee would be the renewal fee.
Right, because as it sits right now, you have the hourly that's going to apply to all courses, whether they're new or existing.
Yeah.
And the idea behind that is that you're going to have someone that's going to pay $700 or more for a course that they've already had approved 10 times, which is going to require no effort on the part of the staff, other than an attestation that the course is the same from the instructor or the provider, versus a course that's brand new that the staff is going to have to spend a lot of hours on.
Yeah. Kristen, what are your thoughts on that?
We could really structure it either way. The only thing that comes to mind on kind of grandfathering in old courses is that we're changing the subject areas, which may or may not impact kind of the prior approvals, but then we're also adding quite a bit more, like there's a higher level of scrutiny and more requirements for courses. So there's courses that may have been approved in the past that wouldn't meet the new criteria. So that's kind of the argument towards doing one initial review, kind of a brand new review, even on a previously approved course, getting the 3-year approval, and then getting them into the renewal cycle. But if the committee would prefer to kind of get those courses in, and then we can make that evaluation as part of the review process and just ask them for all the additional items that we've now identified in the regs or mandated, we could work with that too. It's kind of up to the committee. There is going to be more staff work involved when we implement these new requirements. Even if the course has already been approved, just given the additional items that we're now requesting and have to be reviewed, there is going to be staff time involved in reviewing those items, and then issuing either a renewal or approval. So we can go either way. It really is up to the committee, but it's not going to be as streamlined as the renewal process that we're looking at down the road, where we've already done this high level review we've issued the 3-year approval, and then we're going to do the renewals. So it could really go either way, just depending on which direction you'd like to go.
Yeah, I'd like to see us have some consideration for, the courses that have already been renewed and are coming up again. And I mean, however you could bring that back to us as like process. So do we need a motion on anything as far as
This is
direction
Sabina.
of staff? Hi, Sabina.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, good.
We do not need a motion. We all have been taking wonderful notes. This is great, productive discussion, and I think the staff will have enough to develop something and come back even with a couple different options. That way you can see it in a couple different ways, and maybe they'll have some time to kind of look through and consult with legal counsel and regulations counsel to make sure something will or will not fly before they even bring you back whatever those options might be.
Great.
I think we meet again in December, don't we?
Yeah, December 2nd.
Yeah.
I believe.
So that should be, that should be a good amount of time. Yeah, I mean, I'd love to be able to see some regulatory language, more stuff to the point of what actually is going to go before legal, because I feel like sometimes we have these discussions, we have these ideas, and then we don't really see the language, and then I hear that we're still working on the language 4 or 5 months later, and I always wonder, well, what was wrong with the language that we voted on? So I think it'd be nice to see what kind of language we're looking at so that we can say, okay, I like this language. Is this language going to fly? And then approve that, because it seems like if we're getting from the legal, here's what you got to say legally. I'd like to see that, so that way we know it's. Why does it have to take 4 or 5 months for the legal to still figure it out if that's the language they gave back to us? So that would be great if we could get actual kind of legal language that we can read and go, okay, that sounds really good, and legal kind of presents it to us so we can say yay or nay.
Sure. And we, that gives us a little over a month. I think that's sufficient time for us to put together kind of proposals like what's been discussed today and bring it back to the committee. I would like to note also what staff will be doing in this circumstance is when you're developing the regulation package, in addition to the language, you also have to make sure that we've justified each and every new requirement. So we'll get that work done as well, so that we kind of have a head start on each of those proposals. That's generally what puts us more behind, is the justification more so than the language itself. So.
Excellent. Thank you.
So is there any more discussion? I think we've done a lot to move the potential language forward, and I think between that and the public comment, I think we'll have a lot of input to bring back to the December 2nd meeting.
And did you want to hear public comment now?
Well, let me just check in. Dr. Adams, did you have any more discussion on your end?
No, I have nothing further, and I have patients piling up.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I'm ready to.
Moderator, can you please open this agenda item for public comment?
Absolutely, Mr. Chair. We are now accepting public comment on this matter. If you would like to make a comment, please type the word comment into the Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and send that comment to all participants. Dial-in users, please dial *3 to raise your hand. We will call on people in the order we have requests. And it looks like our first request is going to come from Marcus Strutz. Bear with us just a moment. We're going to send you a request to unmute your microphone. You'll have 3 minutes to speak and a 30-second warning.
It was a really productive meeting, so that's a very positive thing. I wanted to reflect back on the practice management question that came up and to give a little insight on that. The original thought was to stop providers from selling their practice management programs to the attendees and pushing that on them, much like you don't want a nutrition company to say, oh, the best vitamins are ABC vitamins, you should be buying those vitamins, that type of thing. So that was the spirit of it. All of the billing and coding classes that you can take and all the adjusting classes you can take and all the patient education classes you can take, they all effectively improve your practice management, if you will. They improve your production and make you a better chiropractor and a safer chiropractor. But the spirit really was no practice management companies coming in there and dominating. That was kind of the idea there. Everything else you guys are doing is awesome and spot on. And this, again, always the speed of the process is a little frustrating for all the providers. And I also know that a lot of the providers don't even know these meetings are happening. So hopefully the board can reach out to providers and let them know that these meetings are happening. I know I get notification, but I know a lot of them don't. So anyway, appreciate your time and thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Appreciate that.
And it looks like our next request is going to come from Victor Tong. Victor Tong, hold on just a moment. We're going to send you a request to unmute your microphone.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yes, go ahead, please.
I just want to say that I appreciate all the good interaction in this board meeting. I just want to make sure that we have some kind of a notice in terms of when they become effective, when it is the right time. Also, I have some suggestion about the two-track system of renewing under the new fee or the old courses. Hawaii and some of the other states have dealt with that same issue. They allow the same course to be reapproved, but only to a limited number of years. You cannot have the same course over 10 years, without any changes. You can, but you have to reapply, and they would decide on one-on-one basis. So the new application, if it were a repeat course, the fee would be lower because there's staff time issue that would justify the lower fee. But the approval number would say a repeat 1 or repeat 2. And after the third year, then you have to reapply the whole thing, even though it may be the same course. So that may solve some of the issue that was being discussed. As far as the new requirement, of course, if you have to add some new category of case management, then all of those existing courses would have to make sure the provider's responsibility is make sure that they provide that particular course. So there may not be any old course that would be grandfather clause into the reduced rate. I mean, everybody have to face that. I mean, so there's no other way around it. But that doesn't seem to be too complicated an issue. Hawaii have done that, and they have been doing it for years. So I just want to bring that up. And I agree with Dr. Marcus. It might not be a good idea to have these marketing. I'm a provider too. It's not a good idea for the marketer, practice management firm to take over, because they would be very popular. But believe me, you would have a lot of ethics issue right after that, because the main emphasis is to get income, and that priority tend to trump over the educational, professional component of the CE seminar. So I would not be favorable, including that with the CE credit. People would still take them anyway. I mean, if they need them, they will still do that. And there's a lot of company that is doing that successfully. There's no shortage of attendees for those kind of a seminar. So that is all the comment that I have. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Appreciate that.
And that appears to be our only request for comments at the moment. Oh, never mind. Looks like Shasta Carey, we're going to send you a request to unmute your microphone.
Hello?
All right. Hi. We can hear
Okay,
you. Go
just
ahead,
making sure
please.
you can hear me okay. Sorry about that. Yeah, thank you guys so much for all the information today and thoroughly just going over what is to possibly come. Just a couple things I wanted to mention. I definitely like the 3-year idea. I think that's fair. I will say that I still think the fees for new courses, for instance, new materials that we may have for fall conference, it's just going to be incredibly expensive still. So I am just a little bit concerned about that still. And then the last thing I wanted to say was just for any changes that are to come, I'm just hoping that we will get a decent amount of detailed information on what's expected from the provider once the new process is confirmed, just so that we're all definitely on the same page and we can help each other as much as possible. Just to make this transition go smooth if we can. That's really it for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that feedback. Appreciate that.
All righty. And it looks like we have another request from Marcus Strutz. And he is the only one in line at the moment. Shall we take that?
Sure. Please.
All right. Bear with us just a moment, Marcus. We're going to send you a request to unmute your microphone.
Had one more thought, which was on the renewal of courses or the having to change the course. There's, like Dr. Adams was saying, neurology doesn't change. Some of the implementation does, but the outline and objectives does not. A lot of the explanations of chiropractic and anatomy and physiology just remain the same, as does how to do a proper history and exam. So the idea that it should have to have a new, fresh, clean idea and to be a new course doesn't make a lot of sense in most instances, versus what I think Dr. Paris was referring to was the idea of, yes, we have updated and new articles have been implemented, but they fall under the exact same outline and objectives. But yeah, there is new information, and yes, we are on top of that. We are paying attention to that, but the basic stays the same, and that would prevent a lot of course work from the staff. Look at it, okay, course outline's the same, but we know they're on top of it and paying attention. So just wanted to get that in. So I think that's what both Dr. Adams and Dr. Paris were saying. So I think that's on the right track. So great. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that additional comment.
Okay, and that appears to be all of our requests for comments at the moment.
Okay. Seeing no more, we can close the. And are we closed? I'm sorry. We can move on to agenda item number 3. Public comment for items not on the agenda. And I would ask Ms. Walker, were any written comments received for this agenda item?
No, there weren't.
Thank you. Members of the public, you may address the committee at this time, identifying yourself as voluntary, and your name will be recorded in the official minutes of the meeting if it's provided at the time of your comment. And I would ask the moderator to open this agenda item for public comment. Again, it's items not on the agenda.
We are now accepting public comment for items not on the agenda. If you would like to make a comment, please type the word comment into the Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and send that comment to all participants. Dial-in users, please dial *3 to raise your hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. We're going to take about 15 seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment.
Thank you.
Seeing no requests for public comment, do you wish to continue?
Please. Thank you. Moving to agenda item number 4, future agenda items. And I would first ask if any members of the committee, Dr. Adams, do you have any proposed agenda items for a future committee meeting?
I think we've addressed everything. I think we're on the right track.
Thank you. Same for me. I don't have anything future agenda item. Can we please open this for public comment?
We are now accepting public comment for future agenda items. If you would like to make a suggestion, please type the word comment into the Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and send that comment to all participants. Dial-in users, please dial *3 to raise your hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. I'm going to take a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment.
Thank you.
Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to return to the agenda?
Yes, please. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Felt like that was a really productive call, and I'm happy that we were able to get this in. I know it was last kind of a pretty back-to-back meeting, and so members of the public, thank you very much for your comments and feedback and input today. And I believe our next CE meeting is December 2nd. That's correct. And so at this time, I'd like to adjourn this meeting. The time is 1:24 p.m.